Welcome to the Globetrottin ADs. This podcast is for you, athletic directors, activity coordinators, coaches, and program associates based in international schools around the world. The Globetrottin ADs is proudly hosted by Nick DeForest from the American International School Vienna and Matt Fleming from the American International School of Budapest. Here they are now, Nick and Matt and the Globetrottin ADs.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Globetrottin ADs. We're back online, and this is the fall season. We're back in action with all of our teams, and this week's crazy for Nick and I. We're sending teams out, receiving them as we're getting into the meat of the fall season. But it's great to take a pause today and talk to our guest, John O'Sullivan, who is the CEO and co-founder of the Changing the Game project. So we're going to learn about his association and what they can offer for coaches and athletic directors and parents and players, no matter where you are. It sounds like it's a pretty universal stuff. So we're really excited to hear what his program's all about. And before we get into that, though, I'm going to throw it over to my good buddy, Nick in Vienna. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Matt. Yeah, thanks for the intro. It's been a busy week, so it is nice to not talk about our own schools, our own kids, and do something a bit bigger. And John, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. You're definitely a busy guy, and yeah, we appreciate the opportunity to sit and talk with you today.
I'm excited to be here. Obviously, you and I got to meet in person in Brussels a couple of weeks back, and in a room with a lot of great ADs and coaches and people trying to make sport a great experience for their kids, PE teachers and everything in between. So we got to chat there, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's have a podcast. Love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that was great. That was a great opportunity for me to meet you, as you said, and just talk shop with those great people that you mentioned. So I think a lot of people around the world know who you are. I know a lot of people know who you're on. So if our listeners maybe aren't any of those, could you just give us a small little snippet of what you're doing and who you are?
Yeah, sure. So I run an organization, like Matt said, called Changing the Game Project, which started just over a decade ago when I was sort of getting out of full-time coaching and running youth sports organizations, and was a little frustrated with the environment here in the United States that was really centered around the needs and values of adults and not children in sport. And so it started with, I put pen to paper on a book called Changing the Game, and which was really a guide for parents. And then it became a blog and a TED Talk and a crazy evolvement into a big speaking business. And then I co-founded a podcast with my friend, Dr. Jerry Lynch, called The Way of Champions, which, we've just released our 291st straight week of an episode. And so, we get to talk on that to tons of amazing authors and coaches and sports psychologists and sports scientists and athletes and just people, finding their secrets to mastery and how you get good at these things we love to do. And so, I work with lots of schools, lots of international schools, doing coach education and parent education and coach development work. And then I work with some college teams as well, just doing team development. How do you build a culture, a championship culture, and sustain excellence in NCAA Division I program? So I have about 5 teams that I work with there as well.
Wow, that's impressive, and a huge, not just a list, but a span of from youth soccer, right, to the Division I top programs and these awesome speaking engagements around the world. So.
Oh yeah, and I coach a bunch of 48-year-olds in soccer, which is like super fun right now.
They want coaching, or are you just?
Right now we're working on eye contact and listening with the odd soccer ball thrown in.
That's great. Something for everybody.
If you measure them up with like your middle school, your 6th graders, like what's the comparison? Are they pretty balanced, pretty even?
You mean these little kids? I mean, it's unbelievable. You get them right after school, right? And in our world, they come from all these different schools, and they get out of school. They've been sitting around all day. We don't do where I live. Most schools don't do PE, or they do PE like one day a week. It's ridiculous for elementary school kids here. And so these kids sit around all day, then they get in the car, and then their parents ply them with sugar, and then they arrive at my field, and they're just going ballistic. And so, it's trying to get them settled in. So we always play a game first. We let them scrimmage first to burn off the sugar and the excess energy. And then we do our best to teach for 45 minutes and then play again a little bit at the end. But it's been a really interesting, because I haven't coached kids this age in almost 10 years. I was running a program like this when I got out of coaching for the first time. And it's just, I mean, it's really hard, but the parents are super supportive, and I said, there's got to be a little bit of discipline. I mean, we have to teach here, your kids have to listen. And it seems like every time the coach talks is a cue for the kids to start talking to each other. And that's really just not going to be okay here, and I don't like exercise as punishment. I don't want to make them run laps or sprints. Like that's teaching them to avoid things that are really important. So it's hard to be creative and figure out how are we going to actually do some learning here.
All right. How long do you get them for? Just curious.
An hour and 15 twice a week.
Yeah, so it's pretty condensed.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thanks for that intro, a little bit about your background. So we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about your experience so far working with the international crew. So folks like Nick and I, or that kind of audience, I suppose we could call it. So recently you were at the Coaching for a Greater Purpose conference, which Nick was at, and did a little podcast about, featuring coaches coming from international schools throughout Europe to Brussels. The International School of Brussels was kind enough to be the host for that. So that was an opportunity to get to meet some coaches from our background and kind of what we're dealing with. So what are your general impressions so far of the international school setup and working with coaches and ADs who are from these programs? And did you have any experience working with these types of people before you came to Brussels?
Yeah, I mean, I'd worked in Asia with a couple of different schools over there. I'd worked with some other international schools in Europe. We have some of the ADs and stuff have come to the conference that Jerry and I run. So I think we had a good touch point with that audience. And I think international schools have this really unique opportunity. I think one of the biggest problem that I see in a lot of scholastic sports is that we treat sports as extracurricular instead of co-curricular. And so the mission, vision, values that are core to the school day often get thrown out the door at 3:30 p.m. when people go to practice. And so that can be things like the things that we say really matters as a school to be a successful student and world citizen, get thrown out the door, like respect or inclusion or things like that. And then we also sometimes allow behavior from coaches that we would never allow in the classroom. And that I think is really confusing for kids. And so I think international schools have this great opportunity. And obviously you're all different. Some have boarding, some do not. But you have this opportunity for extra touch points with kids. And usually you have parents who are engaged and high achievers themselves. And that's why they're living overseas and putting their kids in that school. So I think it's this really unique opportunity to make sport something more than just a transaction that we're going to teach you soccer or basketball or whatever, and make it more of a transformational experience, that this is just another way to live out our values as an institution. And we're doing it on the sports field now and not just not just in the classroom. And I think it's pretty unique. And it's why, I mean, I love, Brussels obviously is this gorgeous campus in the middle of a great city and beautiful facilities. And I think there's a lot of advantages that international schools have that a lot of what I would call like North American public schools wish they had in terms of touch points with kids. And, so many dedicated, excellent teachers and coaches who are super passionate about what they do and the kids they work with. It's, I love working with those places, especially since I get to go to cool places to do it.
Yeah, that's what we feel like too, working here. Get to travel and,
yeah, exactly.
and see things. But no, you really hit the nail on the head. We're quite fortunate in so many ways that we really get to do a lot of good work with kids. Not that it's not challenging, of course. You're changing the game project and book focused on parents, right? A guide for parents. That's what we want to kind of focus on today a little bit with you, because parents are universal all around the world. Maybe a few different challenges here or there, depending on where you are. But to start with that, how important do you think parents are for middle school, high school ADs and coaches? Like how much should we involve them? How vital are they?
I think they're the most influential people in a child's life. So the idea that we're not going to involve them seems to me to be a bit silly, right? Just like we were just talking about these 8-year-olds that I coach, I have to involve the parents to say, hey, listen, this is what I'm doing. This is why you see the kids doing, this is why your son or daughter might be sitting down on the side for a second because they're not they're talking too much. They're not paying attention. They just threw a ball in some kid's face and gave him a bloody nose for no reason at all. Things like that. Right. So, yeah, middle school, high school, parents are still involved. And sometimes we treat parents as people we have to deal with, which is a really poor attitude towards it, versus these are people we have to engage with, because 99% of parents are great and they just want the best for their kids, and they need to understand why we're doing certain things, especially as coaches. People want playing time for their kids and they want recognition for their kids. And sometimes playing time's hard to give. And so as coaches, we have to give recognition. And sometimes that includes letting the parents know that, hey, I see your son, I see your daughter. And how can we work through this? And when you see a kid struggling, to reach out to that parent and say, hey, Matt, hey, Nick's not, something doesn't seem right. Is everything okay at home? What's going on? Right. And I imagine with the international school audience, so many of those kids, right, they've they've moved, they might be about to move again, all sorts of things that can be going on that can be affecting on-field performance. Well, as a coach, when we notice that and we reach out to the parent and say, I've noticed this, how can I help? It's just a really powerful thing. And then those parents aren't your adversaries, they're your allies. And it doesn't mean that some aren't going to get it, because some will not get it. Some will always lose the plot. But they usually do it out of love for their child and not the other way around. And so, as a parent myself with 2 teenagers, it's hard. It's hard. And I'm just so grateful when they have coaches and other adults in their life that care about them. And how do I know they care? Because they reach out and they say when something's wrong, hey, I've noticed something wrong. It just means a lot as a parent. So, yeah, you have to engage them.
Sure. And that's certainly what we try to strive for. I know Nick does through his program. We try to do it here as best we can. And we're in a good situation where a lot of our coaches are also our teachers in-house. So that's another way they can have an impact through the after-school program on the courts and in the fields. But it can be a challenge, though, sometimes with a lot of our parents. I think a lot of our parents disengage with their kids being involved in our programs because they know they have something that their kids are involved in, and they're happy enough with that. But then there are other parents who are very, most of the time they're pretty approachable. So there's an issue we need to address or a concern we need to get across. It's great that we have our sports programs as an additional support mechanism that if we need to get in touch with a kid who might be struggling or trying something else going on, we need some help.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is, as a parent, I would say my wife and I are disengaged in that we don't really talk to the coaches. We're trying not, we're not talking about that kind of stuff unless there's an injury or something like that. Like, hey, this is just my son, like, you have a relationship with your coach, work through it. If it's around playing time or position or whatever. And they have good school coaches, so I got to give their coaches credit for that. So there's that disengagement where we are engaged is, fundraising and helping the program out in the back end. We try to be engaged with the other parents and coming to game and just being a spectator and not a fellow coach or the worst yet, the additional referee. And so I think I don't think we should take a lack of excessive engagement for not caring. It's just parents like, hey, this is your journey. I want to take a step back. But then some parents want to engage. And so it's important for coaches and athletic directors to give them appropriate boundaries of, how do I engage? Yeah. When is it appropriate, right? Not right after the game, 24, 48 hours, whatever it is. And I think it's also important as an athletic director that your coaches know that, hey, these are the standards of the school, the values. And if you do these things, we have your back. Mm-hmm. And a lot of coaches don't know what those things are. And this is not just on the high school level. This is on the collegiate level. I see this where it's much easier just to fire a coach than deal with a problem parent in a university or in a high school. Right. And so there are definitely coaches out there that behave in a way that probably they should be fired. But there's plenty of coaches out there doing good work who have dedicated decades on behalf of kids who are not getting the support they need from ADs to say, you know what, like, hey, it's a varsity sport, fight for your time, earn it, do things like that, right? They'd rather just, move the coach on and not deal with the problem that this parent, who might be a big donor to the school or something might cause. And it's a really hard situation for a lot of coaches now, which is why I think we see a lot of people leaving the profession.
Yeah. So kind of along those lines, because this is right on my next question or similar topic. So what tips do you have to get parents on board or engage more to what we're trying to do in our sports programs?
I mean, number one, just feedback, right? So early on, here's appropriate, welcoming conversation within these guidelines, right? Mm-hmm. So within this space, this is what's okay, and this is what's not going to be okay. So like I said, a 24 or 48 hour rule. These are the things I will discuss. I will discuss your son or daughter's playing time, their effort, their attitude, their focus, their character. I will not discuss tactics with you. I will not discuss other people's children with you, things like that. Yep. Right. So here's the guidelines. And then I think
like you would lay that out in an email, for example, or
and an email and an in-person meeting. I mean, I think one of the things that we really lost during COVID by doing so many things through Zoom is just the humanity. Yeah. Right. Like, think about the things that people will say to you via text or email that they would never say to your face. Yep. Right. And so I think it's really important to have, in person, be available to meet. For me, like, the longer the email I get, the shorter my response. Right. Once it's over a paragraph, it's usually like, let's set up a call. Yeah. Or when can we meet? Right. And so I think that's it. And then feedback throughout. Right. So how am I recognizing kids for doing good things? Do they have a role on the team, even if they're not playing much or not playing at all? In the case of maybe a high school varsity athlete, asking parents, like, what are your, having them put in writing, like, before the season, what are your goals for this season for your child? And, if it's a team sport, for his or her team, what do you want the season to be like if they can't achieve those goals? What do you want your parent experience to be like? Most parents aren't asked that. And parents don't write like, oh, I hope we go to games and embarrass ourselves in the stands by the way we treat other people or referees. Like, and how can you contribute to that? Yeah. Right. And so you ask the parents, like, hey, this is what you want. This is what your kids want. And so this is what we're trying to deliver. And then just, give feedback throughout. And it's okay to say, hey, listen, your son's 17. He needs to come to me before you come to me. Yeah. In a situation like, how do I earn more playing time? Right. That's part of growing up and teaching kids to have difficult conversations face to face, which technology has allowed them to learn not to do. Right. So let's have these difficult conversations and let's go through things like that. And then when we can't, then I'll talk to you as well. But when I meet with players as well, older kids, and like we won't even get into, right, safe sport implications of, not doing it alone and, sure. and all that sort of doing it public. But when I meet with kids, I always follow it up with an email to the parent of this is what was discussed. I do not leave it up to the 16-year-old to translate the information accurately back to mom and dad. They will shape the story how they want. So I said, so this is what I met with about your daughter. This is what we discussed, and this is the path forward, just so there's no confusion.
I had to do something like that this week.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys do it all the time.
Yeah. No, that's a great tip right there to follow it up, because I have those conversations with kids all the time, but then maybe not, you don't think it's so serious. So it's just a small conversation, but then inevitably the email comes, hey, you talked to my son today about this, and whatever, and it's not accurate at all, right?
I mean, I think we all learned that the hard way of have this conversation and say 90% great stuff about the kid and 10% some critical feedback, and they go home and how was your meeting with coach? Coach says I suck, and it's like, whoa, that's not what happened at all there. So I learned that the hard way, and I learned to provide an effective meeting recap for sure.
Well, one tip I would say that I got from you at the conference was you showed a video about Kobe Bryant talking about his parents, and then a quote from Rainer Martins about a double-edged sword. And I really like those. They struck a chord, and I've used them in parent meetings at the start of this school year. And I like to have resources for parents. I have a parent site on our webpage where I put links to videos and courses to take. And I just wonder what you thought about that as a tool for some of these parents that maybe aren't getting it. And maybe when do you just say, hey, that's a lost cause and let's leave them be?
I think the more resources that we can give to parents, the more resources we can give to coaches, the better off we are. Right. And so, I mean, that video is a 1-minute interview with Kobe Bryant before his death, where he just tells the story when he didn't score a single point when he was 12 years old for an entire summer. I mean, Kobe Bryant, right? And his dad said, whether you score 0 or whether you score 60, I'm going to love you no matter what, right? And he said that gave him the freedom to go for it and make mistakes and fail because he knew his dad loved him. And so powerful when a parent does that, right? That my love for you is not conditioned on whether your team wins or loses or how you play. And we've all coached kids who that's how their parents treat them. And you see them when they're having a bad game, they just start melting down because they know the car ride home is going to be awful, or they know the situation at home is going to be really, really bad. And so, yeah, having those resources, understanding that some parents will use them all, understanding that most parents will do the bare minimum asked. And then, yeah, some people will just not get it no matter what, right? There's this American psychologist, Jim Taylor is his name. And he said to me once, he's like, John, I've worked with Olympic athletes for 30 years now. And here's what I found. Every one of their parents loves their kids. Almost every one of those parents at some time or another loves their kid in a very unhelpful way. And a very small percentage of them are mentally ill. Right. And I can't, he's like, and I can't help those ones. Right. And so you will sometimes have people who just don't get it. And this is why I always say, you have to have your values or your covenants or your standards, whatever it is, front and center, that this is what it means to be a part of this program. And you put those front and center and you let everyone see them. And when people are not living up to them, you let them know. And then eventually sometimes they're just not going to be a good fit.
Right.
I think the worst thing we ever get asked to do is remove a child because of the behavior of the parent. But sometimes you have to do that for the benefit of everyone else, just like you would do in a math, if they were disrupting math class or disrupting English class. So you can't be here because you can't, you're just incapable of doing in this classroom what's needed. And it's a hard thing to get to, but sometimes it has to happen.
We were close to that once where we just, said to the parent, look, this is the program. And if you're not happy with it, your daughter doesn't need to play. And that was the straw where they said, no, it's, backtracked when they realized that maybe it could have some real impact on the child,
Right. But, Matt, before you jump in, like if I'm the coach and I say that, I have to know that my AD has my back. Like I have to know I'm on firm footing to say that, and that parent's not going to just go, oh yeah, well, I'm going to your boss. And as the AD, the head of school has your back, or the board of directors or whatever it is. And the problem is, when I was a kid, I'm 50 years old. When I was a kid, when I had a problem, I went to the coach and I learned to have a conversation. Then it came, we've had this like gradual transition to the parent went to the coach. Now, a lot of times the parent doesn't even go to the coach. They go to the AD. So the first time the coach hears that there's a problem is from their boss. Yeah. And now in a lot of places, they skip the AD and they go straight to the principal or the superintendent or some board member. And so now that board member is going to the principal who's going, wait, why is this the first I'm hearing it? Who's going to the AD who's going, why is this the first? Who's going to the coach who's saying, why is this the first I'm hearing about this? We've lost the chain of command.
Right.
And it's just really sad because oftentimes these are tiny issues that if it goes to the superintendent of a school district or the head of school, it becomes a really huge issue that shouldn't have been.
Kukri are a global multi-sport clothing brand specializing in providing the world's most prestigious schools with bespoke-made and designed team uniforms for students of all standards and abilities. If you are frustrated by inconsistent colors, branding, costs, and sizing across your school's uniforms, then it's time to discuss an offering where every sport is available from softball to soccer for male and female athletes at rates to suit your budget. To find out how Kukri could elevate the apparel of your student athletes to a professional level, email the team at contact@kukrisports.com. A dedicated sales manager will offer you a quote today. Mention this ad and receive a special offer on your coach or PE staff order.
This is great stuff, John, and I really appreciate you sharing some time with us. And we're really just scratching the surface, I'm sure, in terms of these topics, and we can go probably on and on for another hour or so easily. But we're going to take a pause here and wrap it up, and just want to say thanks for joining us today. So if folks want to get some more information, where can listeners go to get more about you and your program?
Yeah, I mean, the website is just changingthegameproject.com. And on there, you can find links to our blog, links to the podcast. The podcast is Way of Champions, and that is on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find a podcast. The books or any bookstore or whatever, Amazon, and all them. So my coaching book's called Every Moment Matters, and Changing the Game is the parents' book. For those looking for international shipping, if you're not in an Amazon country, I've discovered a website called Book Depository, which doesn't charge shipping. Cool. So that you pay a little more for the book, but you ship it for free versus, I get people in New Zealand want one of my books signed. I'm like, yeah, the book's $20 and shipping's like 47. Yeah. So, sorry about that. So I think that's it. And all the social links are on there as well. Is a great way to just stay connected on there.
Perfect. We'll put all those in the show notes and share that around as well. But, John, we usually ask, our guests are usually from around the world, as you are in Oregon, right? But we usually ask them their favorite thing about their adoptive home, whatever country they're in. But I thought maybe for you, ask you what your favorite place to travel to is.
Oh, Okay.
Not
Great-
that Oregon's
great
not
question.
great,
Great
sorry,
question.
there could be some great things in
Well,
Oregon, but keeping it
I'm
international.
I'm a native New Yorker, so Oregon is like a foreign country. But I've been here 16 years, and I just love the mountains and the outdoors and stuff like that. Man, I have been blessed in my life to go to just some amazing places, throughout Asia and Australia and whatever. But I mean, if you ask me, like, if I had to pick a city tomorrow where I would want to go live, it would probably be Barcelona.
Okay.
So I just really like it there. Good food, good vibe, good football. I like it. So that would probably be my choice if you forced me to move tomorrow. Yeah.
Well, I don't know of an international school there, so maybe you could go there and work internationally as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I just want to say thanks for our listeners. Before we got on the program, we found out John and I have a mutual connection through some friends. A former colleague of mine who's actually living in the same neighborhood as John, and their kids are actually going to school together. So small world stuff comes alive once again, and give our friends the best.
I will.
And I just want to say thanks again for joining us and all the insights about your program, and we appreciate it, of course.
Well, thank you both for doing this, and Nick, kudos to you on your book as well, and I hope it's been a great resource for people. And I love doing this, so hopefully someday we can do it again soon.
All right, thanks again, John.
Awesome.
It's great.
Until next week, this has been another episode of the Globetrottin ADs.